Mr. President, I echo the remarks presented by my friend and colleague, the junior senator from Florida. I agree wholeheartedly with his analysis. I think it's unfortunate that we missed this opportunity to enact meaningful change today, change that's backed up by science. It was in January of this year that the Centers for Disease Control ordered the mandatory use of masks on planes, trains, buses, and other modes of public transit of every kind, everywhere across this country. If Americans fail to comply with this mandate, they risk being fined or even criminally prosecuted. 6 months later, the coronavirus continues, with the CDC refusing to recognize its own research that the mandate is no longer defensible. It's now June. The vaccine's been available for months. COVID cases are plummeting, and the country's anxious to return to the way things once were. The CDC has even said that vaccinated Americans don't have to wear masks and can get their lives back to normal. More than 45% of Americans are now fully vaccinated. States are lifting their restrictions, and in restaurants, stores, and workplaces across the country, it's no longer required, mercifully, to wear a mask. If Americans still want to wear one, they can make that decision for themselves. They're free to do so. But the CDC's requirement that vaccinated individuals, even vaccinated individuals, must wear masks on all forms of public transit now blatantly contradicts the agency's own policies and the agency's own scientific research. It needlessly promotes fear and plays politics with the lives of the American people. Not to mention, it's imposed absurd expectations and serious consequences on children and families, especially families with children, trying to travel. You see, after the January mandate, the CDC issued a corresponding mandate that exempted only children over the age of 2, in keeping with their original mask-wearing guidance that is among the most stringent in the world, and I would add, the most unrealistic in the world, when you consider that they require it up to and including children as young as 2 years old. So what have been some of the results of this guidance? Parents have been kicked off and banned from flights if their small children refuse to wear a mask. For parents of kids with disabilities and many parents of especially small children, compliance has been nearly impossible. We already know that children, especially young children, are unlikely to contribute to the spread of the virus. What we do not know, however, is what scientific studies, if any at all, the CDC happens to be relying on in reaching this guidance, in reaching the conclusions underlying this guidance. In fact, several of my colleagues and I sent a letter to the agency with this very question more than 2 months ago, on April 22nd, 2001. And now, more than 2 months later, we have yet to receive an answer. It's a very simple question, and we have yet to receive any shred, any semblance, any scintilla of an answer. I find that unacceptable. Mr. President, if the CDC actually believes its own research, then it should act like it. And if it believes in the vaccines, the very vaccines on which we have spent billions of taxpayer dollars, then it should act consistently and instill confidence in the American people rather than fear. And with the vaccine now free and widely available, Americans should be able to weigh the costs of the options before them and choose for themselves whether to receive the vaccine, whether to wear a mask, or whether to take their own precautions free of any mandates imposed by their government. But if the federal government is going to have a say in whether or not there should be a mandate, it should be up to Congress, the sole branch of the federal government empowered to enact law, and not coincidentally, the branch elected by and held most accountable to the people at the most regular intervals. It should be up to this branch of government, the legislative branch, to enact such a mandate. To the extent that the CDC issued this mandate, it did so using authority delegated to it from Congress. We in Congress did not pass the mask mandate, and we do not have to defer to those bureaucrats who did. The science, Mr. President, the science shows that wearing masks should not be federal law, and we should act accordingly. We should, moreover, give Americans some reason to want to be vaccinated. When there's light at the end of the tunnel, when they can see that there's some tangible, immediate benefit to them getting vaccinated, they're more likely to do it if they can safely enter a place of mass transit without a mask if they choose to do so. Many more people will choose to get vaccinated if we give them that benefit, or if we at least allow the operators of those modes of transportation to allow people to do that. We can assert our rightful authority and promote sound science and common sense by supporting the bill introduced by my friend and colleague, Senator Scott of Florida. We need this to pass. The American people have suffered through a very, very long COVID winter. It's time for them to be able to make their own choices. That is what we do best as Americans, because we believe in freedom. We also believe that whenever the coercive power of government, especially the coercive power of the federal government, is exercised, it must do so with the authority of Congress. We should never tacitly acquiesce to the authority of overlords within a bureaucratic agency who are elected by no one and ultimately accountable only to themselves. We are in charge here. We make the law. We shouldn't blindly defer to anyone, certainly not the CDC, when the CDC ignores its own science. Thank you, Mr. President.